Welcome to the Believe in Your Office podcast, sponsored by Boomerang and Common Sense Office Furniture, the podcast where we explore what makes workplaces work. Every episode features candid conversations with leaders, business professionals, and workplace experts who've been in the trenches. They share the real stories, the wins, the failures, and the lessons learned about culture, teamwork, and leadership that actually matter. Let's get into it.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Believe in Your Office podcast. Today, I have a great friend, colleague, co-worker, sort of. Our kids play sports together, multiple levels. Erin Warwick with Wolf Commercial Real Estate. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, hello everyone.
So, Erin, I know that you have just a vast knowledge of the industry in general from a real estate standpoint. You have many years of experience, both on the landlord side and also the, tenant rep side and, also project management and the management of assets and sales of assets and different things. So this is going to be a really great conversation today to kind of, fill us in on all of your hindsight and ideas and also, recommendations for that part of the world in the real estate market. But why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you maybe got into the industry and a little bit of where you came from and where you're at.
Sure. Hello everyone. I'm Erin Warwick with Wolf Commercial Real Estate. I am the executive vice president here, but I pretty much wear a lot of hats on a day-to-day basis. I run the office from the brokerage management perspective with Jason Wolf, the owner, and I run an entire portfolio of office, Class A in Mount Laurel and Marlton, as well as you mentioned, been involved in sales and all facets, mostly landlord representation, but some tenant representation from just the natural flow of things and just relationship building in general. My career started at Liberty Property Trust. Shortly before that, I had worked in the banking world and knew that wasn't for me, and started with Liberty and pretty much followed every buyer after that, from the office sector to industrial, and dabbled in asset management, property management, and kind of helped flow, the process of how a lease goes from start to finish, I would say. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. And again, I know a lot of time spent in the industry and a lot of relationships built and, a lot of different offices in general that you've been a part of. I was actually in banking as well in my first job. I've only had two jobs, this one
Interesting.
and my first job. Well, if you don't count college work and work when you were a kid, but
Yeah.
careers. And I liked banking, just 2008 didn't like banking. And so I got out of banking and into office furniture. But yeah, no, it's
Interesting sector to go from.
yeah, right. Well,
Right.
the funny story is when I was in mortgages, we were selling basically MBSs, mortgage-backed securities, to Wall Street directly. And we were kind of maybe funding the loans that, the retail market would create for buyers, purchasers, refis, and things like that. And we were doing mostly A-paper work. And when the mortgage crisis hit, it was kind of, on the B side, BC side, where they kind of were having a lot of default and they were having a lot of, funding issues. But we were funded by companies that were funding that paper as well. So when they are needing to pull money to, make things right, they had to take the money from the good to pay the bad. So we kind of went BK on Wall Street within a overnight. So at that point, that's when I decided that I really wanted to own something for myself. And I didn't care what the industry was, but it had to be something that would be something that I could be a part of and have foresight for no other reason than if the company was going to go out of business, I would have the vision of that happening before
Or
anyone else
control
did.
of your destiny. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you say that. I didn't really touch on why I left banking, but a big reason why I left banking is because my manager did not know how to do my job. And one day I had to leave as a mother, and she told me I couldn't, basically. And I was like, I don't want to work for the man.
Yeah,
I need to
right,
figure this out here.
right.
So that's kind of why I left banking pretty much. And ironically went to another corporate entity at Liberty. But I think that kind of kick-started my processes and really developing me as a person and a professional, and then knew ultimately that would end up in an entrepreneurial like background, which is where I am now. So I think you do have to find like structure and balance before you can just jump into something that like you have to figure out the structure and balance yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I think that was, it's not just banking, right? Because I don't want
No,
anyone to think that it's like that, but it's just a bad spot. But, what happens is you kind of crave that control, if you're someone like me or you, where you just kind of want to have hindsight. Like we weren't doing anything wrong. I was
right.
doing everything correctly. Everything was going great. And then one day the rug's pulled out from underneath you. So we looked
Yeah.
around and I also think that like when it's a myopic, maybe that's not the right word, but when it's a industry where you're kind of focused on a specific clientele, you maybe feel a little cheated that you're not talking to everyone that you really can every day to kind of grow the business. And I think what's really interesting about our world is that, whether it's real estate or office space or furniture, most people, go to an office and work there.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that, obviously. And most people have some kind of connection to real estate, whether it's rentals or purchases or anything like that. And you now have the ability to talk to people in all different arenas, not just in the business world, about what you do. And a lot of your social interactions and a lot of your random, at a restaurant or in the airport or on your travels, your interactions are now tailored around what do you do, and then there's a higher percentage that what you do may be of value to someone when you're not in an industry like I was I do mortgages. Are you shopping for a house? No, okay. Like I'll talk to you
You're
later.
like, you're out.
Right. Whereas now
Yeah,
it's you sit in a
totally agree.
chair. What kind of chair? Where do you sit? Do you go to the office? Do you like the office? Why do you like the office? That
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
absolutely. I also think it really helped like mold, like you said, like relationships. I remember like the two key factors that I learned from Liberty was you're never too good to pick up a piece of trash at a property. So, just because you're the CEO or you're the property manager or you're a leasing rep, you're preparing that space for somebody else to make it their home away from home. So
Mhm.
you want to make it as comfortable as possible. And that is a big part is like introducing vendors that you trust, which is how we build our relationship and saying, he's bent over backwards for me. I know he'll get you in on time. I know he understands your space. And then, architecture, lending, title, all those people come together and they support your services and make you look better than you are, right? So that's a big part of, why relationship building is so important in any job, I would say.
Yeah. No, I mean, you have a lot, you've given me a lot of ideas on directions we can go on the
Keep this at
conversation.
25 minutes though, because we don't want to
Yeah,
bore
I know. Well, we'll add a
kidding.
little bit of time because there's a lot of things we could discuss on that. I mean, I think I want to start with you mentioned something that's really important that we think about oftentimes when we're designing space for our clients and your clients as well.
Yeah.
That's structure and balance. And I think structure and balance is something that you mentioned, that you need when you're looking for a career, but you know structure and balance also is, important when you talk about the workspace. For us, what does the structure of the office look like on how you guys work, but also what is the balance of you spending time there and how you're doing that? And I think I'm sure that when you're showing your clients space or you're, showing them around, I'm sure that's a big part of your conversation. And what are some of the things that they might be looking for? What are the key takeaways that you might think come to your mind when you're talking about structure and balance for people when they're looking for office space or industrial space or any space really?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't want to drive home the like post-COVID world, right? But we're seeing like the after effects of people who had short-term renewals were saying we'd never come back to the office and did, these short lease terms and then said, now we have presentations, we have large meetings, and we don't have enough space for our people. And people
Mhm.
are, seeing the effects of actually being together in an office setting and how that's important. One deal in particular, we did hoteling, right? And then everyone was kind of like, I definitely want to be in the office Tuesday through Thursday, and there's not enough space for them anymore. And, as that happened, we're seeing more and more office tenants kind of grow or right-sized to what they should have been. I think they were just nervous to, get people back to the office, and I don't think it's a mandatory thing. I think people have like evolved in learning how collaboration is very important in the office. I mean, we did it the other day, just talking to my counterparts. I was like, wait, I have a space for you, or I have this use that could work for you. Just talking about what you have available, seem to your effect. If we're out and about and, I mentioned a tenant that has a need, you might be able to connect and find the appropriate furniture for them in that short time frame. So it's like, I think collaboration is what was missed, and just
Hmm.
being together with people,
Hmm.
and connecting. So that has
Hmm.
really, charged the uptick, I would say, in activity recently, especially in the office sector.
It comes up often on the show. We talk about this need for human interaction, really. And I think it was craved so much. It was such a
Yeah.
big craving after COVID, where we were talking, and even like this, we make fun about how we're kind of recording the episode, but there's there's so much more that you get out of being in person, and it winds up being so much more beneficial to the business. You learn about so many things. I mean, there's been so many times when you're just sitting around talking and the conversation just goes a million different ways. And not to bring up a sore subject, since I know it's all near and dear to our hearts, but one of the best memories I have of our friend Evan is when, you know, just three, I think it was like 3 months ago, you and I were meeting on something else, and Evan came out into the office space, and we were sitting there in this meeting table, and we just started talking about all kinds of things. And I think it was awesome because it probably would have been our 15-minute conversation that wound up turning into like an hour and a half where everyone was looking at their watch going, I think we need to leave. And that's the kind of things that happen when you have collaboration in the space. And I will digress for a second, because the best story, I think that this is like, I'm going to give him credit for this forever. I think the airlines should totally change the
Yeah,
way they do carry-ons, because right now the airlines, and I hope someone like listens and forward this to them because it's a great idea. Right now,
absolutely.
everyone wants to carry on their bags, not necessarily because they want to carry them on, but mostly because
Don't
they
want to be
they don't want
inconvenient.
to pay for the fee. So
Yeah.
Evan's idea was, why don't you give everyone free check bags and make them pay for carry-ons? And it would just eliminate all the fighting for overhead space and all the other stuff. And I go, that's such a great idea, because guess what? I would pay for a carry-on because I don't want to wait. It's not so much about doing it. So I think those conversations were the ones that, that you would never get in a chat situation, or
Yeah.
a situation where, okay, we're gonna have a meeting and the sales meeting is going to be, over Zoom instead of in person. We do them in both ways because we have Orlando and Philadelphia, and I host them from each location on alternating months. And
Right.
every time after the meeting at the host location, we have like a breakout session that's informal. Like, we just talk about what we talked about. We talk about new things. The other location that was on the Zoom call kind of drops off and goes back to what they're doing. So there's things that you find out about people and their social life and their personal life that you would never do if it wasn't in person.
Yeah, we've started doing that, but it's more like distressed assets, I would say. I wouldn't say generally distressed, but difficult assets that we're trying to lease, or clients that we're trying to service quickly, or things of that nature. So we've kind of geared now our sales meetings towards things like that, so that we can say, here's our last pitch. What are some ideas that I haven't thought of that maybe you have, and how can we help each other? I think we've gotten into this, especially as a 1099 world, right? We're all kind of competing against each other, but we work for the same umbrella. So it's a way for us to collaborate on just thinking, as opposed to competing. I think you kind of lose sight of that when you're just, in a dog eat dog world. And we've been successful. Look, if neither of us lease the space, then nobody's making any money. So,
Hmm.
so I think it's really been a driving force, of why we've been successful at some of our troubled spaces. So.
100%. And you brought up another thing, like right after the structure and balance part, where you were talking about job responsibilities. And I think, it's not so much a linear definition of job responsibility. It's more or less, when you're in an office or you're around an office, it's what can I do to help, and creating this team atmosphere. And the most successful businesses and the most successful groups of people are the ones who are willing to kind of jump in and not say, like, that's not my job, I don't do that. But in fairness, if you're not in the office and you're not sitting here listening to what's going on, or you're not in the mix, so to speak, you're not going to know that someone else needs help with their job responsibility, right? I'm sure there's been many times as an office manager when you're sitting there and you overhear things and you're like, hold on, let me fix this for you, right? Whereas if you were home or on an appointment, that might get overlooked and then the problem could perpetuate for a while without being brought up, and then it'd be a problem for you to fix it later rather than being there present to be able to fix it right away.
Yeah, and sometimes people think you're unapproachable. I'm always cautious of that in the office because I wear many hats that like I am kind of running the office and we've hired a lot of new people and I may not be present physically on a day-to-day basis. So, I think as we evolve and we're kind of, multitasking at its finest, we talked about this prior to the call, how many sports our kids are playing or activities they're involved in, and like how can you wear all these hats and then get to them and work a 9 to 5? Like it's impossible. So making sure they always know you're available for questions or comments. I mean, we have multiple ways to get a hold of people, cell phones and emails, and
Hmm.
and also like at that same token, being respectful of when you do that, right? Jason and I now have this like fine line of like he tees up all of his emails and then at 8 a.m. I get like 10 and I'm like, oh,
Well, because he
but
knows you're going to look at them, and
exactly,
yeah,
right. But I'm like, I'd
so
rather
he
you
can't send
send
them when he wants to because you'll look at them because that's how kind of worker you are.
absolutely. So now it's like this laughing joke that he knows I get up in the morning and I'm like, oh man, he was up till midnight sending emails, but at least he's been respectful and that like they come at 8 a.m. So I'm like, I'm okay with that. Like that's my focus time is like I can check my computer early in the morning and get some things done. So yeah.
I do the same thing. I think I am very mindful of text. I wasn't always, but now, especially if it's work related, personal, obviously, if
Yeah.
someone's up, they're up. But work related, I'll say, hey, it's 9:30 and I know I have this great idea, but the new feature on the iPhone where you can send later on text messages is I use it every day. It's amazing. Like I'll say send this at 8 a.m. It'll be the first thing that hits their inbox, but it's something that I'm thinking of now. So I don't forget it. Number one, I also respect their time. I was talking with one of our sales reps in Orlando last night. It was 9:30 and he abruptly was like, okay, have a good night. And it was, we were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I was like, okay, I totally understand. Like, that's you saying, like, I'll talk to you tomorrow about the rest of it, but we got everything done that we were supposed to get done. I don't, you, like you were saying, you don't want to be unapproachable as a business owner and as a leader in your industry as well. You know that you're looking at the phone all the time. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm seeing things that come through. Um, I'm just trying to manipulate when I reply to them. Sometimes it's kind of really hard to condition yourself to do so. So giving yourself that buffer to say, okay, I'm not going to do anything after this time
Yeah.
is sometimes needed. And I think you as an employer doing that for your employees is really important too. And it's just one of the things that you do when you're talking about how do you make the work environment so approachable and fun to work at, but also have a dichotomy of personal life and work life.
Absolutely, for sure. I think, just learning to respect boundaries now that we're all like readily available. It's like, so, you know, before you could put your phone away and like you weren't getting, or your emails couldn't get linked to your phone. So you didn't check them again until 8 in the morning. So, you did.
Jason and I always had this conversation back and forth, and he'll be a guest sooner than later. But he's like, one of the main reasons why we started doing so much work back and forth is because every time I reached out to you, you picked up or you replied or you answered. And I think that that's always hit home for me. And I've always done that for all aspects of my life. I think I'm very responsive in a lot of things. So it's actually become a problem because now people are like, is everything okay? You haven't responded.
You're like, wait, I shouldn't be responding. It's 10 o'clock at night.
I've had to dial back a little bit and say, okay,
Yeah.
no, I need to like let things sit a little bit longer in some instances so that not all the time I'm responding. It's like I don't want you to think you're not important, but I also don't want you to think that, I can respond as soon as you ask me to. I wish my kids think I'll respond as soon as they ask me to because as soon as they call me because they need money. And that's the
Yeah, and then
only
Apple Pay
reason.
request ensues after. So
Send me a Venmo. That's the
yeah,
only there has never been a call that says, "Hey dad, guess what?
no.
I just got an 83 on my geometry test." It was, "Hey, I got an 83, but I'm really calling you because I need money."
Uh,
Um
totally hear that. Totally hear
so
that.
Yeah, no, so it's good.
Uh,
But I think also, creating space for people who when you're designing a space to have those areas of refuge is
yeah.
important too. It's a big conversation that we have where, okay, look, there's a big push for um, office space to be a place where people not only want to go, but feel like they could stay there a long time and also take breaks. And there used to be, if you told any one of our parents or grandparents that you have like a nap pod or an area where you can just go take a rest, they'd be like, "What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Who's sleeping at work?" But it really is this thing now. It's talking about health and longevity and how you do things. And, it's talking about if you have an area where you're working so hard you just need 10 minutes to unwind. Is we have some outdoor space, we have bikes, we have just different things that are instead of just micromanaging every minute of your employee's day,
Oh, a
it's okay
million.
to have them have some off time.
Yeah, one space you may not recognize, but your wife would. But when the mother's room got introduced to the workplace, it was like a game changer for me. I
Hmm.
remember I was like trying to figure it out in my car on my lunch break, and then they're like, "We got a green space." When I was at Liberty, and I was like, "This is amazing." I have like
Yeah.
a chair and a refrigerator, and
Hmm.
it just takes one less like stress off of your day to have these
Hmm.
like things readily available to you or just a space that you can go and like you said like a pod calm space that you can go and separate yourself because I know I'm sure you're seeing it more the collaboration spaces are very popular but you need to
Hmm.
make a phone call every once in a while or you need to just
Yep.
like decompress by yourself in an office and I love to kind of shut my door put some music on and like bang out emails or create spreadsheets or
Yeah,
something so
of course.
yeah.
And everyone takes personal calls. Like if you're a manager and you're thinking that your employee should be working all 8 hours of the day, you're probably a little unrealistic, to be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, I walk around here and we have a great environment and everyone works really hard. And are there times where I'm going, well, that's a lot of downtime? Sure. But then I always look in the mirror and say, well, how much downtime do you take? And what are you doing? Are you still able to get things done? At the end of the day, if the job gets done,
Yep.
that's really what's most important. And circling back to the mother's room and the things, when we talk about space planning, I don't think a lot of people know this, but it actually not only is it just something that leaders think about when they're designing space, but it's actually a law. If you have over 50 employees, you have to offer a mother's room.
Interesting.
Because I don't know if it is exactly, I think it is, it's New Jersey NPA. I don't know where else, if throughout the country it's in every single state. But what happens is if some states adapt it and you have these larger companies who are multi-state or national, they're going to be putting them in every office just because they have them anyway. So these are
Yeah.
areas that people hear mother's room. Obviously, it's for the reason that you're thinking after birth, but it's also a place where you can go and sit, close your eyes, maybe, just unwind for 10 minutes, listen to some music, listen to a podcast,
Yeah.
just kind of get away from the screens because you just need like 10 minutes to breathe and maybe not the weather's not good enough to go outside and you just want some privacy and you don't want to sit in your
New
car
Jersey
like you
weather
did.
isn't like Florida weather.
Unfortunately, no. It is now. It
I
is
know.
getting there. I mean, that's why
Finally.
I'm wearing my spring colors today. I'm getting
I
ready
love
for
it.
it.
Same. I am ready. I am ready. And that's, you brought up that topic of like outdoor space too. I mean, it's a struggle trying to create that in New Jersey, but it's very important. Some people just have a box that they need to check as well that they have available to their
Hmm.
employees, which
Hmm.
is a nice outdoor space, some
Hmm.
bikes, something that brings like
Hmm.
health and wellness to,
Right.
your working environment.
So I'm curious, you started out in banking and more of a structured environment, so to speak, and then you kind of, you know, molded and progressed into, a sales kind of organization. What's something that you think that it was like the biggest difference between working in like a really hardcore structured environment versus the sales environment when it comes to as it pertains to like the office and what you guys like what was one of the main differences or one of the things you like the most or hate the most or vice versa?
So I think you were So you were forced to learn pretty much every job from, I started in like an admin type profession. So you knew how to complete every general admin's job in the office, which also made you multifaceted, right? It taught me property management. It taught me the reasons why things are done from a property management perspective and how that can parlay into your lease or what things are important to look for, especially from like a landlord tenant perspective. And then from there, it kind of, helps you evolve to, your understanding of like what's important and what really isn't, right? I learned like that 9 to 5, we talked about it, right? Like I wasn't actually working all 9 to 5, all
Right.
8 hours. I was present for all 8 hours because we
Sure.
had to clock in and clock out. I learned a lot, but there were a significant downtime, and now we have even more ways of communication via Zoom and Microsoft Office and Teams calls and things of that nature that we never had before. We can create videos of a space, so we don't even have to show people a space.
Hmm.
Look at it virtually. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of things that have freed up our time, but you wouldn't have learned things that were important to somebody or a client if you weren't present from day one. So, I think that that was really relevant to me, like learning that structure, learning what is important, spending those 8 hours with different people, taught me what to look for now. So I would say, just the 9 to 5 part was like, we're learning was not necessarily as important as like the aspect of learning and understanding your job. And I think I really grasped that from the corporate perspective. And then as I moved over, I think, you learned how to adapt to new personalities, to different type of tenants or leases that you were looking at. I was in this bubble of only understanding my properties and everything that we owned. And now I'm like, wait, I have to go out into the real world and see everybody else's as well, like not just my bubble. So,
Right.
yeah, I was like, oh no, I'm not really sure I'll be good at this, but you learn that all of those skills that you developed just help you, it's just in a different building or a different space, and it's just a different person that you're learning to connect with, like what is important to them. So just, I would say that,
Yeah.
I think,
You're touching on without touching on it. You're without saying it directly is, one of the big things is the culture.
yeah,
And you guys
yeah,
at WCRE, your culture is very evident in the marketplace, right? I mean, it's highlighted through many different medias, right? Mediums
yeah,
or medias.
absolutely.
But the culture is built um within through the office, really, right? And it comes from how you guys start the day or how you end the day or how the office is kind of the center focal point and then branching out from there. I think you guys, I think that's kind of what you were touching on as far as being in the office in the beginning, where it's structured and you're working in your cubicle and learning and talking to people. It's the culture's changed a little bit where you guys are doing a lot of things. I think one of the coolest things that WCRE does is the food drive around Thanksgiving time where you literally fill your office with food for the pantry and it's stacked from top to bottom and you can barely walk in there, right? But everyone
Yeah.
comes to your office and it begins these conversations and people talk about the culture. And I think we talk about it a lot, but one of the biggest things that I think changed after COVID was how people dress. And,
Yeah.
it used to be super, super business casual, business appropriate. And now business casual is basically like Friday night casual, right? Like
Yeah.
you can come in however you want, but that's also producing a culture of where people really love the place where they work and they want to be there more often and they're, also help growing something together in a way that's comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say another thing I love that Jason does in the office, and hopefully he listens to this because I don't give him too many compliments.
Well, we'll make
But
them.
yeah, but he's every morning you come in and everybody's frazzled, right? You just dropped your kids off at school. You're like, you have a million things going in your brain. You're worrying about what your afternoon is like. And he takes the time to go to everybody in the office and say hello.
Yep.
And it could take him 25 minutes to go around to the entire office and say hello. But he's like, I'm here, I'm present, I'm saying hello to you, I'm putting aside, whatever we're talking about business related, and I'm just saying, checking in, I think that really creates this like vibe of like, I'm important and I'm needed in the office. I kind of get in and run right to my spot, but it really just makes everybody feel like they're a part of something, which is, really unique. So kudos to
It's
him.
also something you couldn't do if you weren't going to an office.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
all part of the culture. I mean, as a leader, I think it's important to do things like that. I hope that people listening to it are like, I do it. Maybe I have to do a better job. I'm certainly thinking that, I'm so busy on a day-to-day, grind in my own head that I walk in, I know I say hi to 4 or 5 people, but sometimes there's maybe people I miss or it's a longer walk, so I don't make it back there all the way. But it's important. I mean,
Yeah,
that's all
absolutely.
important, and it can't happen unless you have a space. So it's another thing that really, I think that's really what helps the longevity of people in your workplace too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think if you make people feel welcome and you actually treat them like a human instead of another just robot sitting there doing what they're supposed to do and bye, see you later, and you have no idea what's going on,
Yeah.
then they're not going to stay around. I think that's all part of building culture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if we'd love to pay every employee $1 million, we would,
Hmm.
right? But we can't. So showing them that they're important and that, they're respected is a big part of like who we are, I think. So,
Hmm.
and then you touched on giving back to your community, showing things that, are outside of maybe our individual reach, but as a company, we reach so many others and show that like we are present and we are here. It's just a great thing that we do here. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it was great. See how fast that went? I
I know.
mean, you
Yeah.
would have thought that it was, I told you, we didn't have to do too much prep. You're natural. It was great. We did a great job, maybe talking about a lot of different aspects of it. I think we could do it again, honestly, and we'll get Jason on, but I appreciate
Yeah,
your
great.
time.
Yeah, you as
And
well.
again,
Enjoy
why
the
don't you just
weather.
refresh
Yeah,
everyone's memory?
sure.
Erin with Wolf and you guys, what are some of your specialties? And then what's the website so people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so Wolf Commercial Real Estate is a full service brokerage investment real estate firm as well as a property management arm. So we can do all facets of real estate, really, from, managing your asset to selling your asset. And then Wolf Commercial Real Estate is who we are. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks again for your time. I'll
Thanks.
see you on the fields this weekend, most
Yes.
likely.
Yes.
And
Well,
everyone
it's
else.
Easter. Hopefully not. I don't think we
Oh yeah, no, actually we're off. You're right.
have.
But
Wear those spring colors. Yeah.
soon enough.
Yeah.
So everyone have a great day. Make it
Yeah.
a great
Take care.
day and make a little noise quietly.
Your office isn't just where work happens, it's where culture is built, ideas are born, and teams come together. And if your workspace doesn't support the people in it, everything else becomes harder. That's where Boomerang and Common Sense Office Furniture comes in, supporting communities in Orlando, Florida, the tri-state area, and everywhere in between. Boomerang and Common Sense both specialize in high-quality office, hospitality, healthcare, and educational furniture that doesn't just look good, it performs. Whether you're furnishing a growing team, redesigning for hybrid work, or just need furniture that actually works for how people collaborate, Boomerang and Common Sense make it easy and affordable. Visit boomerangofficefurniture.com to see how the right furniture can transform the